Comic books, or graphic novels if you want the Ponzi term. There might be a difference, but I'm not sure myself because comics are an entertainment medium I've never got into. But it is a fruitful one, with countless characters, stories and possibilities. And like novels, plays and ye olde tales before them, the desire to adapt them into a new and different form seems to be mandatory these days, with better results than others. Like films, comic video games adaptations are usually lazy cash-ins to coincide with the current flavour of the month, but not all. On the rare occasion when the planets align, a tie-in game will be released featuring actual effort, but that depends on what material there is to use. Batman, for example, is a perfect candidate for video games. Crimes to solve, stealth, combat, cool gadgets and an awesome city to explore. Contrary to this is The Punisher. As you may know, The Punisher is a hard-boiled vigilante, brutally fighting criminals over the murder of his wife and child. Sound familiar? It wasn't terrible, it was just mostly a boring Max Payne clone, which is far superior, so the Punisher game just felt unnecessary, but like I said, what was more to be done with the material? So today we'll be looking at a game from a series I'd naturally never heard of before playing it. The Red Star. Yeah. Created by Christian Gosset, The Red Star is set in an alternative post-World War II Soviet Russia known as the Lands of the Red Star, with a mixture of Russian military history and folklore. The combination of cyberpunk technology and mysticism immediately reminded me of something I'm more familiar with, Shadowrun. I'm down for that. Released on PS2, PSP and later on iOS. But there was almost an Xbox version. It was cancelled, sure, but only after it was completed. An Xbox version does exist out there, but it was never commercially released. The only thing the public saw of it was a playable demo that came with issue 35 of official Xbox magazine. But still, an unreleased finished port that has my collector senses tingling. If, like me, you're unfamiliar with the story and setting of the Red Star, this game does kind of throw you in the deep end. There's pretty much no introduction regarding the situation of characters. There is a brief backstory in the manual, but like most tie-in games, in order to not mess with the main canon, a small slice of not very in-depth story was probably written for the sake of the game. In an ongoing war to control the Republic of Nogorka, Sky Marshal Uruk Antaras and his crew Maya and Kyozo's ship, the Konstantinov, is under attack from the Dark Lord Imbol's chief assassin Troika. The ships, by the way, have the best name for airships ever. They are known as Sky Furnaces. Fuck yeah. They should have just called the game that. Sky Furnace. That got your attention, didn't it, bitch? Speaking of Shadowrun, is this also an RPG? Sadly not, as that is more my thing. The Red Star takes an action arcade approach by combining side-scrolling and top-down shooting and melee combat. Maya and Kyozo meet up with the third selectable character and the one I'm playing here, Makita. The gameplay is the tried and tested satisfying progressive beat-em-up. You go through each stage defeating waves of a variety of enemies with melee combos you've learned along the way, combined with upgradable weaponry. Points are earned as you fight your way through the stage, and the better your performance the more you earn. When you complete a stage, you can spend these points on upgrades such as improved health, faster weapon cooldown or more powerful attacks. Regarding this system, the Wikipedia entry reminds me of a term that I think gets thrown around all too often to describe some game mechanics: RPG. Because the Red Star uses a point system reminiscent of experience points, RPG is used to describe it. But I disagree. I used the search feature in Steam to browse games tagged as RPGs to see what games came under it. Borderlands is not an RPG. Bioshock 2 is not an RPG. Sims 3 is not an RPG. The first two may come under the term action RPG, which I think is redundant as most RPGs feature action anyway. Oh yeah, the Red Star. What sets it apart from your typical Streets of Rage is differences in camera perspective. Mid-level bosses appear very frequently, and they are mostly tackled with a top-down view and placed just like an old-school shmup. These two styles mesh very well and keep the gameplay varied with different and challenging bosses. The stages take place on typical futuristic locations, aboard sky furnaces, high buildings, structures and walkways, etc. Some stages are on the ground, but in cliched fashion the ground is run down and desolate. If science fiction has taught us anything, is that mankind will be spending the future in space stations, airships and sky cities because... fuck the ground, I guess. What a lot of modern games lack is a sense of peril. A game that relies on a life system or has checkpoints every couple of minutes negates any challenge or sense of danger. Not the Red Star. It doesn't fuck around. The only time it saves is between stages. No lives, no checkpoints. If you die, it's right back to the start you go. What might give you an easier time and probably more fun is something else that is dying in these modern times. Local co-op. Bringing a friend along would definitely give this a feel of arcades of old, unlike me who records these games alone. So what else of Christian Gossett? He's had his finger in many creative pies, including work on other video games such as Apocalypse, Pitfall 3D and Heavy Gear 2. He was hired by Lucasfilm to help design the Star Wars universe and is responsible for the double-ended lightsaber. The man has a creative mind and it certainly shows in the Red Star game. It's a fresh take on a classic format. The cyberpunk setting gives for some great visuals and lends itself to unique enemies and weaponry. The characters control really well and the combat feels delightfully weighty. The two basic factors that video games were created on are fun and challenge, and the Red Star has both in spades. For personal enjoyment, I usually tend to lean towards something with more depth. Quick pick up and play games will only be played for a short period as the novelty tends to wear off. I didn't find this as much with the Red Star. Having to restart a particularly difficult stage is frustrating, granted, but I kept retrying because of the well-made, satisfying gameplay. Grab this if you can find it. Grab a friend if you have any. Grab a couple of controllers and have a good old-fashioned blast with this overlooked gem.